education is clearly a massive part of the energy transition for the country, right? But what the Energy in Schools platform does is engage in the school's energy consumption, but also it delivers a lot of lesson plans as well, doesn't it? And there was a big part of the project where you worked, I think, with universities and other teachers to create the lesson plans.
Yeah, so it wasn't just us and Samsung. There was also the University of Lancaster. There was a Centre for Sustainable Energy based out of Bristol, and they put together teaching plans that dovetailed with STEM subjects, that basically ticked all the necessary boxes that you'd have for sort of year 6, year 7, year 8, that sort of age bracket, where it was looking at, could you code things? So utilizing the Microsoft platform for effectively building code and utilizing code in schools. It enabled you to put lessons together about batteries and how batteries work, and sort of introduce kids to, in a age-appropriate kind of way, the sorts of things that they're going to be grappling with over the course of the next 20 to 30 years. And when you start introducing things like microbits, where you actually write a code, you load it onto something, it actually, gives you feedback. And then you can use that to monitor, I don't know, the temperature in your classroom, or you can use it to monitor how often a door opens and closes in the hallway, which leads to, hot air being lost and all that kind of thing. It gives kids, I think, skin in the game. So yes, you've got all of the protests, and you've got Greta Thunberg doing her thing and all that sort of stuff. And I guess young kids maybe feel like they can't do much because they're 12 or 13 years old, so they can badger their parents, but they don't. Maybe they feel like they're a bit disenfranchised. And one of the things that this enables them to do is to make a material difference in how their school uses energy, uses less energy, uses energy better, because it's them that's actually recording the fact that it was really hot in the gym at 9 o'clock at night. Why? There was nobody in the school. It's them that's actually doing that. They're collating the data. They're also looking at the fabric of the school and working out where double glazing is, where triple glazing is, where they've got draft excluders. But all of that kind of stuff helps, I think, kids feel empowered to do things. And you get so much more traction out of a school-based program where the kids are really involved. I think if all it is just passive teach. I mean, I've got two kids, 16 and 11. And the only things that they get really excited about are anything where there's some practical element to it, where they're actually getting involved. Yeah. And this is definitely one of the ways that we were able to do that. So it's really cool from that perspective.
I think one of the other things is the Department for Education have now set out that every school needs to produce its own climate action plan and how they're going to start to transition the school, which is a massive task, right, on schools and public authorities and teachers. But actually what this platform does is not only does it enable children to learn about energy and engage in it in a different way for the school, but also they get to a point where the children can actually champion it and build the school's climate action plan using the platform, which is just fantastic, right? And I guess actually just to take a step back, this is suitable across all different schools, right? So from Key Stage 2 and upwards.
Yeah, and actually what was quite interesting about that is like the whole thing was kind of designed for, as I mentioned, like year 6, year 7, year 8. It was that sort of age. One of the first people to take this up, and I know they won't mind me mentioning it because they want to be cutting edge, is Bath College, which is further education. So they don't even have year 6, 7, and 8. They've got years, whatever it is, 12 and 13, basically. But it had so many things that they thought would engage their kids that they actually wanted to pick it up and use it. So what has been interesting is that the potential use cases for this, I think we originally thought would just be this reasonably narrow band in schools. Actually, it probably expands much further up the education ladder than that. And actually, at a theoretical level, you can probably also take it into non-educational areas, because everybody wants to know what's using energy in their building, right? And that's what SMS, that's what smart is all about. But ultimately, a smart meter can still only tell you what's going into the building. It can't tell you where in the building stuff is being used, lost, where inefficiencies are, and all that kind of stuff. things like microbits start to give you that level of insight into what's going on. So yeah, it's good from that perspective. But we code everything so that the idea is that it should be, out the box, pretty much ready for somebody to use without having to have a degree in either engineering or computer science to be able to make it work.
Brilliant. And that the purpose of that coding is to do that first initial energy assessment to go and kind of create that baseline of the school's performance, right? So, and that's key, right? Is when you combine that with the smart or advanced meter data at a kind of a half hourly level, you combine that with the data that the microbits are capturing, that gives the school the baseline. And I think that's important because one of the things that we quite often talk about is energy insights alone, right? And just understanding energy patterns and usage and if you combine that with the data that we're getting from the microbits, then that level of behavioural change is really significant. In loads of other work that we've done, we've shown that just energy insights alone can save sort of 7 to 8% in energy a year, which for a school's budget is pretty significant. So that's not to be sniffed at all, and that's really important. One of the most exciting bits though is that when you combine that with the data from the microbits, is that for me that just sets kids' minds racing. The stuff that you can do with it beyond. And we talked about some great use cases where they recode them to blue tack it to a teacher's kettle and start to understand how much the teachers are spending on cups of tea and what the grid mix is at the time and all that kind of stuff, which is great. And I think that's subconsciously building in a real understanding of energy in a education setting where they're not only just learning about this technology and what's available, but also why it matters. And that's really important. We hope that this will get to a point where kids are going home from school saying, at a very minor benefit, saying we should get a smart meter because look at what we can do and the behavioural changes we can make if we understand it. But at a more significant level, there is a huge amount of carbon footprint generated by public buildings, and we know this. If we are going to transition the country to net zero, then schools, buildings are going to be quite difficult to do so, right? So this baseline and this understanding of opportunities for behavioural change is brilliant, but also the retrofit options that microbits and the platform will identify is really important as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that, I can't remember the exact stat, but it's something like, I think that central government's carbon footprint, something like 37% of that is represented by schools. So a big old chunk of government's entire carbon footprint is a function of schools. And one of the things that sort of initial pack goes out, unwrap it. First thing you're going to do is you're going to go and you're going to deploy these microbits around the school pre-coded. So this one is for temperature, this one is for door opening and close, this one is for your photocopy machine, we want to see how often you're running, and this one's for the school canteen to work out how often you're doing X, Y, and Z. But in addition to that, it's not just a case of sending these things around the school. It's also the kids are doing an audit. So they will walk into a classroom and they'll go, is it double glazed? Are there curtains on the windows? So i.e., is it going to be more insulated as a consequence of that? What is the material that the floor is made out of? Right. So i.e., how good is it at retaining heat or losing heat? Right. Does it have soft close on the door rather than being left open? So they will look at a lot of fabric related elements when they're actually deploying it. And that's quite important because the school stock in the UK, well, we've seen it with the rack problem, right? There are some very, very old, very inefficient schools, and a lot of them probably don't have, short of paying somebody a really large amount of money to come and do an audit, they don't have particularly great insights into how good, bad, or indifferent the fabric is. They certainly don't have a database of it. The DFE don't have a database of it, as far as I'm aware. Their ability to understand at a granular school, classroom, laboratory level what it's made out of. I mean, and rack is a good example. It's taken an absolute disaster for everybody to work out that it turns out there's a whole load of concrete that could fall down. There are lots of other things within schools where no one really knows. This is a good way of starting to gain a much better understanding as to the fabric of those buildings. And once you understand the fabric of the building, you can start to work out what do we need to do. It also helps the school make a business case, right? So we are hemorrhaging heat here. We are in the bottom quartile of performance as a function of we've done all the behavioral stuff we can do. There is nothing else we can do. We may as well be shoveling. We may as well just be sticking our heater out on the patio and just letting it, heat the fields for all the benefit that we've got here. We need to do something, but you need the evidence.
Yeah.
In order to be able to lobby, whether it's government or the school governors or whoever it is, to basically say we need to spend money on this. And that's the sort of thing that this begins. Because what you basically got, if you go into a school, you've got 30 little energy audit engineers running around, probably getting up everyone's nose massively, but nonetheless running around deploying these things and going, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. And here we now have, the evidence to say we need to do something about it. So I think it's really good from that perspective.